So yeah, project people. So myself and Jess, who you'll meet in a second, we're going to be, one of us will be at every session. So we'll be the regular people that you see at all the sessions throughout the whole of Creative Futures. So my name's Jo. I've been working at Study Hire for about 6 months, but prior to that, I've worked in education for 20 years. So very used to doing these kinds of events and have lots of experience in IAG and giving information about different courses and careers available. In that my photo, you'll see my cat Mumble, who frequently appears on, as my colleagues will vouch for, he frequently appears on screen. So if you see him, that is Mumble. I'll hand you over to Jess.
Hi everyone, my name's Jess and I've been working with Study Hire for about 4 years now. I love doing events like this, so it's brilliant to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us and I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you, Jess. So before we start fully, I'm just going to tell you about a couple of functions we're using today. So the first one we're going to be using is chat. You'll also have a raise hand. Just ignore that. We're not going to be using that today. So we're going to be using chat. So that this is the chat. So if you click on chat now, we're just going to check that works and all your chats are working. If you want to type in the chat box what your favorite movie is. Wonder, Matrix, Hidden Figures,
Hunger Games,
Perks of Being a Wallflower, Baby Driver. See, I've seen lots of these.
Oh, some can't choose. I know, it's a difficult question. Great Showman, oh, brilliant. Yes, Harry Potter. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. Awesome.
Cool. So yeah, clearly chat is working and you've all got very good taste in movies. Oh, I haven't heard of Heroes Rising.
Howl's Moving Castle? Oh, I love that film. Good choice.
Good. I haven't heard of that one, Jess. Jess is our kind of movie buff. She's watched lots of movies in the... Some people haven't chosen yet. Cool. Okay, so it looks like chat is working. So the other thing that we're going to be using today is polls. So we're going to kind of launch polls throughout the event. So just to test that's working. So what will happen, we'll ask a question, it will pop up on the screen and it'll give you some tick boxes that you can answer. So just to test that one, I'm going to ask you what you think my favorite movie is. So I'm going to launch that poll now. So do we think my favorite movie is The Notebook, Happy Feet or Avengers Endgame? A couple more people to vote. Cool. So we'll end the polling there. So as you can see, almost half of you went for Notebook, but my actual favourite movie is Happy Feet, and there was a clue in the title when I spoke to you about my cat earlier. He's called Mumble and he's named after the character in Happy Feet. So now we're going to have a guess at what we think Jess's favourite movie is.
So my choices are Back to the Future, Captain Marvel or Frozen. Ooh. What do we think?
We've got a few more to go, a few more to vote, like 90%.
Brilliant.
Oh, I think that's everybody. So we end the poll there.
Well, that was close. That was close. But,
very close.
But I'm pleased to say that the majority of you were right. Back to the Future is my favourite. Well done. Although all three of those are in my top 5 films. So well done.
So yeah, so that's the two functions that we're going to be using today. Oh, and you're all experts at them. Okay, so yes.
Brilliant. Yeah, so just to explain a little bit about Study Hire, some of you might have heard of us before, but some of you might not. We are a partnership of different universities and colleges from across Swindon, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire. And it's great to see so many of you from all of those places join us tonight. You might recognise some of those logos on the screen there. And our job really is to work with secondary school students to offer different events and activities like the one tonight to help you make informed decisions about your future. So we really hope you get a lot of information from tonight. And with that being said, I'm now going to hand over to Martin, who is delivering the session today. Thank you so much, Martin.
Right, Martin, you should have control of the screen now, so it might take a...
Okay, thank you, Joe and Jess, thank you. Well, hello everybody and good afternoon. I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you, but perhaps one day things will change and we'll no longer be quite so reliant upon virtual technology and we can start occupying the same rooms again. I guess like any good narrative, really, the best place to start is at the beginning. And I suppose this is the beginning for me. So just to give you a very quick bio history on where I've been and what I've been doing. Before I came to work for Study Hire, I was a film studies lecturer at a variety of institutions across the UK, and these are most of them, I think. I've had a long career, so the list seems to be getting ever longer. But I've sort of moved into talking to students like you as well these days, and advising students on film studies courses and giving them what I hope anyway to be, some accurate, up-to-date information about maybe where to apply if you are considering doing a degree in film studies at some stage. I still keep my toe in very much. I'm a professional voiceover artist these days as well, so I record my voice for film and a variety of education, corporate and commercial clients. And I like to still keep my eye on what's going on in the film industry, so hopefully I remain up to date. So having taken you through the bio history, let me just see if I can take you to the next slide, which should. Okay, let's go back one. I think for about half an hour, I'm going to be talking to you about heroes and villains in classic Hollywood narrative. But before I get into that, it just might be worth mentioning to you that film is probably about 126 years old now, invented really in 1896. It was the last great Victorian invention, really. And of course, throughout that 126 years, film has periodically hit a period of major innovation and technological change. And I suppose two of the biggest advances in technology were in 1926 when talking pictures came in, which changed the industry almost overnight. And of course, in the 1990s with the advent of something called digitization. So instead of film being recorded onto a piece of celluloid and run through a camera at 24 frames per second, today we have film recorded using digital data and then that put onto a data bank, which of course enables film to be manipulated in all kinds of various ways, ways that couldn't have possibly been imagined even 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I'd like you to sort of just keep that fact really in your minds if you can, because regardless of the technological change that has occurred, the basic principles of Hollywood narrative have remained largely the same. And I've chosen tonight to speak to you about Hollywood narrative because I think American cinema, whether one likes it or not, it controls something in the region of 80% of the world box office. So no matter where you are in the world, whether you're in Asia or whether you're in the Far East or whether you're in Europe, Hollywood cinema is extraordinarily accessible. So you can get to see Hollywood films, pretty much wherever you are. And I might just add that don't just rely on Hollywood film. Virtually every country in the world has its own national cinema. And many of those national cinemas are really worth checking out. So if you're particularly interested in Indian film or Iranian film or French or Spanish or even British cinema, then please do your research and check these things out, because they are really, really worthwhile and worth your time. Anyway, back to tonight's talk, and I'm focusing attention then on what is called the classic narrative film in Hollywood. And there are probably several key features of the American Hollywood film. This is just perhaps three of the principal features. And I think that whatever film it is that we might be watching, whatever genre, whether it's a Western or whether it's a rom-com or whether it's a science fiction film, they are all recognizable to us, largely because we've seen so many of them before. And, you know, we understand the conventions that are being used in, say, Westerns or rom-coms or science fiction. So the world is portrayed as a recognizable place, first and foremost. And the story, whatever genre the film is, the story begins in a state of equilibrium. That's to say, a state of balance. And a state of disequilibrium is created until finally a new equilibrium is established. And it's these stages of storytelling, of visual storytelling, that are sometimes referred to as the three acts of a film. So that's to say that it has a setup, and that's to say that this is the beginning, this is the introduction of the story, this is where the principal and supporting characters are introduced to us. The complication, that's to say that somewhere along the line, there is a problem that emerges that has to be resolved by the time we get to the end of the story. Now, within that basic framework, within that basic narrative framework of a beginning and a middle and an end, we've got some principal characters. And the hero, of course, is a very well-known character, not just in Hollywood film, but in all forms of storytelling. And the hero is a figure that probably goes back at least to the days of Greek mythology, perhaps even further back than that. You will have all no doubt have heard of characters like Achilles and Hercules. And these were heroes embedded in Greek mythology. But the characteristics of these heroes largely remains the same. So for instance, it's probably a good idea to try and define what we understand by the term hero. And here, I've got a thumbnail definition for you. A hero is defined as a character who prevails in extreme circumstances and dramatizes a sense of morality, courage, and purpose. Though they may be ambiguous or flawed, they often sacrifice themselves to show humanity at its best. Or if you like, they work on behalf of everybody for the greater good. And I think probably we can all think of, you know, heroes that we admire or that we enjoy seeing. So in this slide, this one here, I've just included three that you might recognize straight off the bat. And this idea of ambiguity and a flawed nature, I think, is something that exists, you know, in these characters, and will largely explain, perhaps, you know, what has motivated them in the stories in which they are located. So, for instance, you'll all be familiar with somebody called Batman, and you know, if you think about the back history of this character, Batman's parents were killed by a criminal gang working in New York City or Gotham City, which directly, of course, has a bearing on him becoming motivated to find serious crime. And in this instance, Spider-Man, if we think about him for a moment, his alias Peter Parker is orphaned as a young boy, and he's brought up by his Auntie May and his Uncle Ben. And Captain Marvel, well, her backstory isn't that clear perhaps at the moment, although I think it will become more clear as time goes on, because in 2019, she emerges in the film, she emerges out of a conflict between two opposing alien civilizations. And she probably, it might be fair to say, is the first female, apart from maybe Wonder Woman maybe, but among the first female-led superheroes. And the film, from February, I think February 17th when it was released, 2019, it's grossed something in the region of $1.1 billion at the global box office. So, I mean, that's an extraordinary feat for any film. So she's a character, I think, worth keeping a close watch on, because I think with the success of a narrative like that, if her back history is a little sketchy at the moment, then I think, you know, there'll be the screenwriters will be very busy filling in some of that detail so that audiences will be able to get a better and a clearer idea of where she sprang from. Now, up until this point, I suppose, I've been talking about film, Hollywood film, as a form of entertainment. And of course, that is exactly what it is. It's a form of entertainment, and a very commercially lucrative form of entertainment. But film is something more, I think, than just mere entertainment. Film actually works on a different level. It works as a kind of cultural product. And I think that's to say that film engages with societies in a way that perhaps other art forms can't or don't, at least maybe not to the extent that cinema does. When you think of, you know, the total global cinematic audience out there, it's a pretty impressive figure. So by showing you here, of course, we've got two female characters here, and it's important to say, I think, that women in leading roles have become much more prominent in recent times, and that's got to be a good thing. And of course, not just women have been represented in leading roles, but much greater thought and consideration has been given to issues to do with diversity and race and ethnicity. And, you know, that will explain, you know, why Black actors now, more and more, a lot of people would say more work needs to be done, but more and more Black actors are being used in, you know, very prominent leading roles in these, not just in these sorts of films, but of course in many other sorts of films as well. And while we're thinking about film as a cultural product, again, it's worth stating that if you take a hero like James Bond, or you take the franchise of the James Bond films, for instance, 27 of them made so far, starting originally in 1963 with Sean Connery. And of course, we're now eagerly awaiting Daniel Craig's last outing or final outing as James Bond in a film called No Time to Die, which has had its release date put back at least twice, maybe even 3 times because of the pandemic. But if you look at James Bond as a kind of cultural product, you can clearly see that between 1963 and 2021, the world has changed. If you go back to the early days of James Bond and you look at the villains that were represented in those films, they were quite frequently Russians. Because of course, in 1963, we were right at the beginning, well, some people would argue near the beginning of the Cold War period. And in Hollywood film, of course, heroes and villains were often certainly in James Bond films anyway, were represented in this way. Over the years, the representation of the villains has changed, of course, and that is largely going to be determined by whatever the American filmmakers determine is the greatest threat at any particular time. Remember, films have to be believable, credible, in order to be able to take audiences with them. And this one here, those particularly observant among you will see, let me just, slides, will see that this is not a Hollywood production, but a British television production, but it's there because it just illustrates how genres have changed over time. Of course, this was a role that was predominantly in possession of male actors for many, many years. And now, of course, with changes in society, it's now, of course, equally the property of female actors as well. So, if we have identified heroes as some of the principal characters in contemporary Hollywood film, we've got to just say one or two things about villains as well. Equally, they date back to Greek mythology as well, if not earlier. And again, we've probably all heard of characters such as the Medusa and the Minotaur. And here too, I've got a thumbnail definition of what we might think about when we think about villains. A villain is defined as a character whose wickedness of mind, selfishness of character, and will to power are sometimes masked by beauty and nobility, while others may rage unmasked. They can be horribly evil or grandiosely funny, but sometimes tragic as well. So if I just move us on to the next slide, if it will go. There we are. We have a group of 3 villains here. I think, you know, there is a certain sense of nobility surrounding Darth Vader and Maleficent here. And of course, the orcs tend to kind of rage unmasked. It's probably just worth keeping in mind that Darth Vader originally was cast very much in the role of a villain, but in the subsequent prequels may now be regarded as something of a hero. And the theme of nobility perpetuates in Lady Deathstrike, and the idea of a kind of tragic hero persists in a character like the Joker. And Dolores is in here, of course, because she's not just a super villain or a superhero. There are villains just about everywhere. So I'm just going to take a break there for a moment and pass you back to Joe, who's going to take the reins for a few slides at this point.
Oh, Joe, sorry, I think you're on mute at the moment, but yeah, you're back. We're just going to break up this section a little bit, give Martin a little chance to catch his breath. We were going to put your knowledge to the test now, looking at heroes and villains, and we're going to launch another poll. So we have our Star Wars hero here, Rey. We'd like you, please, in the poll, to vote who you think her villain is. So we have the choices of Kylo Ren, Chewbacca, Darth Maul, or Darth Vader. The results are coming in, brilliant. I think nearly all of you have voted now.
So we have a few Star Wars fans amongst us.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, if we ended there.
Fantastic. Yes, the majority of you were right. 55% Kylo Ren. Well done.
So our next one is Toy Story. So we've got so our heroes here. So Woody and his friends, Woody. But who's the villain? Is it Buttercup, Mr. Pricklepants, Lotso, or Trixie?
Ooh. Here I come.
I think a lot of you must have watched Toy Story as well.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just also one of my favourite movies. Cool. I think we ended that. I think everybody's voted. And you're all geniuses, because yes, Lotso, the big pink teddy bear, is the villain in Toy Story 3. And we have the final one, Jess.
Fantastic. And our last one, and it was great to see in the chat, lots of Avengers and Marvel fans. So who is the villain to the Avengers? Is it Groot, Agent Coulson, Thanos, or Doctor Strange? Cast your vote in the poll now. Oh, got some good results coming in. That was a really quick vote. Well done.
Yeah. You've all voted on that one.
Excellent. And again, well done. Yes, the majority of you were right. Thanos is the villain. Well done, Marvel fans. Well done.
Thank you. You've all clearly been paying attention and all know your heroes and villains very well. So I'm going to pass you back to Martin now.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jess. Well, clearly, you can see, I think, already that, you know, this notion of heroes and villains in contemporary Hollywood film is not something that just applies to superhero films. It's something that can cut across many different genres, you know, within this this narrative framework that I've been talking about. And I've been largely talking about issues to do with representation so far, you know, the representation of principal characters within Hollywood film. I now want to sort of change gear slightly and come on to say one or two things about the technical aspects of cinema, the technical aspects of film, and to actually tell you something or convey something that you may not have necessarily heard before, and that's to say that film has its own language, its own syntax, if you like. Now, you'll be familiar with English literature, say, for instance, that has a language. And literature has the language of vocabulary. It has the language of punctuation and paragraphs. And without the use of that, it would be very difficult for us as readers to understand what is going on. Well, in film, it doesn't have paragraphs and words or vocabulary and punctuation, but it has a combination of technical devices that enable us to understand and read what is going on and understand, more to the point, what is going on. So camera movement and camera position and camera angle are going to be extremely important when it comes to telling a story. If any of you have ever had any kind of practice, you know, at making your own films, you'll understand what I mean about camera movement, and that's something perhaps that we'll come back to in just a moment. But equally important to camera position and camera angle is framing. That's to say that everything that you see within the frame is going to be significant in some way. It's not there by accident. The filmmaker has made deliberate choices to include something within that frame. So that's really important too. And then there are things like lighting, sound, editing, and cinematography. All of these things have a very distinctive role to play in the way in which visual storytelling is achieved. And of course, you would probably expect me to say that, whoops, let me just go back. Sometimes it just jumps a couple of slides. You would expect me to have a visual clip to show you at this point. And this is about a 2-minute clip in which hopefully it will illustrate to you the variety of different film techniques, what we call film language, you know, how the camera works, how the edit works, how the lighting works, but principally the camera. So just have a look at this.
Camera movement can add a lot of meaning to your footage, so it's important to understand how different types of movement are interpreted by your viewers. Today, we're going to break down the basic types of camera movement that are achievable with a phone, so that next time you're shooting, you understand the implications of what you're doing. First up is the pan. A pan is when you move your camera from one side to the other. Panning generally is useful to reveal a larger scene, like a crowd, or to reveal something off screen. If you step your speed up a notch, you get the whip pan, which is handy for transitions showing the passing of time or traveling a distance in a dramatic or comical way. We covered this in more detail in last week's episode, so if you want to learn how to actually execute a whip pan, go check it out. So to tilt, imagine your camera is your head nodding up and down. Tilting is useful as a reveal technique as well, either to unveil something from top to bottom or the reverse. Zooming is probably the most commonly used camera movement, as it lets you easily move in closer to the subject without actually physically moving. But be careful with these, as zooming lessens the quality of your image. If you are going to zoom, try to keep the movement as smooth as possible. A tracking shot. A tracking shot is one in which the camera moves alongside what it's recording. Tracking shots are sometimes called dolly shots, but they can be differentiated by the direction they take. See, tracking shots will generally follow along the horizontal axis as the subject moves. You're probably familiar with walking and talking scenes where a tracking shot stays on the subjects as they move. Tracking shots are also useful for showing a stretch of road or scenery. Now, a dolly shot is one in which the camera moves toward or away from the subject you're shooting. So instead of utilizing the zoom to get closer, the camera is actually physically moving in relation to the subject. Using a dolly to slowly push in is useful for building drama or tension in a scene, or it can simply imply some sort of significance to the subject it's moving in on. And finally, the following shot. So this is a type of tracking shot in which the camera continuously follows the subject's action. If you want to achieve a smooth, seamless following shot, Steadicams and gimbals are your friend. Otherwise, shaky handheld following shots give a sense of realism or unease. Long, continuous following shots, if executed well, are extremely impressive and mesmerizing cinematic feats. So there you have it. Whether you're using a pan to slowly reveal a piece of information or following the action with a tracking shot, camera movement can really help support the story you're telling. Bottom line, don't move your camera just because you can. Make sure you're moving for a particular reason and motivation.
So, don't move the camera unless you have to, is the message, I think, from that short video clip. You have to keep on remembering that it's only sensible, it's only wise, it's only really necessary to move the camera at any point if it's going to express meaning and if it's demanded by the script. And you can see from that short video that camera movement carries with it information to an audience. And whatever type of camera shot you're going to be using at any particular time will carry pieces of valuable information, valuable narrative information for the audience. So really important. So using the tools then of film, for Hollywood forms of cinema, the purpose of film is to tell a visual story. That's to say that it's got to tell a linear narrative, that's a sequential narrative, running in chronological order, which best drives the story forwards for an audience. Remember that the last thing you want to do as a filmmaker is to confuse an audience. And the narrative structure in popular film, it's important that audiences have to successfully identify with the principal character, usually the hero, within that framework, comprising a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I hope that I've explained that to you in a way that is understandable. But until you actually begin to kind of make films on your phone or using a camera, it's kind of difficult to understand. I do get that. You've actually got to, at some point pick up a camera and see for yourself what it is like to actually try to create a visual story. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you will do that as time goes on. Okay, now we could do with a moving image here, really, couldn't we, as we're focusing and concentrating on the moving image, but we'll have to make do with a still. But these next two slides are here for a purpose, and that is that the camera movement here, if this was a moving clip, would be zooming in very slowly. It's a kind of push in, a very slow close-up. And of course, that's done to try to create tension for the audience, because tension means meaning, and it means that audiences will understand what's going on. Lighting is going to be very important here, as our hero, Ray, is occupying perhaps a hostile space. This is not somewhere that she would ordinarily be. So it's important that the lighting conveys her fear or her sense of tension. She's already dressed in, if not white, then a light colored costume, which of course from a lighting point of view, from an audience point of view, indicates her as the hero. And of course the character on the right here, in this particular case, would be regarded as the villain. Darkly lit, rather menacing, and rather dominant within this two character frame. Let's just move you on to the next one. And again here, we've got a classic two shot, the villain and the hero in the same frame. The villain particularly dominant here. So you can begin to see, how these characters are going to be lit and framed, how the camera will move, will largely determine how the audience is meant to feel. And then finally, almost finally anyway, just to say that heroes don't always do all of the work anyway, all of the time. In popular fiction and in popular film, they often have helpers. People who are there to try and assist or help the hero to achieve, their ends, their goals. And sometimes in film, there are more than one helper. In Harry Potter, we have two of the helpers here. And of course, if you're as old as I am, you'll certainly recognize this helper here in the form of Han Solo. Harrison Ford, of course, the name of the actor here. And I think this will be finally. So how do I bring 30 minutes of talking to a conclusion? Well, this is it. In thinking about all of the elements that I've been talking about this afternoon, the narrative elements, the film language, this is a clip really from Attack of the Clones to try to illustrate for you really how all these various individual elements are brought together finally to be able to tell a story that is convincing as well as entertaining for an audience.
Master Windu, how pleasant of you to join us.
This party's over.
Brave, but foolish, my old Jedi friend. You're impossibly outnumbered.
I don't think so.
We'll see.
Well, that caught me by surprise. But I think
Yeah.
you can see from that clip, hopefully anyway, what I'm talking about when I talk to you about narrative and heroes and villains and film language, a cinematic language, and how it's all magically brought so skillfully together to be able to take an audience with you through the previous 2 hours, you know, so it's quite a feat and it's quite an achievement. Now, very quickly, I know we're getting pressed for time, so I'll have to very quickly just say that if any of you are thinking about film as a career, and I hope some of you will be, it's encouraged, I think, these days to think about getting yourself a degree in some form of moving image, you know, whether it's film and media or digital film production. You are encouraged to do it. I think it gives you a much better prospect of finding work in the industry at the end of the day. Most film courses, degree programs these days offered at university will have an element of work experience. And those course leaders at the university will have been working very diligently and very hard to establish good, effective relationships with industry. And you will get some work experience, no doubt, during the course of your 3-year degree program. So I've just included here half a dozen universities. I've tried to think about where in the country some of the good ones might be located, and I've spreaded them out here. So from Scotland to Cornwall, the choice is yours. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin. That was really interesting. It's really exciting. I think we now open it up for questions.
We've got a couple in the chat already. Thank you so much. If you do think of anything, please pop them in there. One question we've had is, do you need to have done media as a GCSE to have a career in film? Media studies, I think.
Yeah, well, I think any subject that gives you a kind of introduction to communications is useful, but it may not be an essential requirement. Most of you have probably done English literature, so I mean that requires a certain kind of amount of imagination. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily essential.
Lovely, thank you, Martin. A couple more coming in now. One was, what types of grades would you probably need at GCSE or A levels, do you think, to go into get a degree?
Well, I mean, the higher the grade, the better your prospects, I suppose, is the answer to that. Just try to do as well as you can. But I think any A to C would be great if you can manage it.
If you can see them all, Jess. Somebody's asking, I don't know how much you know about Bournemouth Arts University or just Bournemouth University. Do you know about either of those, Martin? Yeah,
Bournemouth University was for many years, and I think still is to some extent, was regarded as something of a training ground for entrance into the BBC, particularly. So they have a very strong history of delivering communications and the moving image in media and film. So that's definitely one to consider.
Lovely, thank you, Martin. We've had one come in. Are there any apprenticeship options to get into film?
There will be, and I think probably the best thing for you to do is to get in touch with an organization called Skillset, and they are a representative body for the communications industry. And if there are any apprenticeships going anywhere, they are very likely to know. So Skillset, so Google them.
Martin, somebody's asked if are there any universities that you can study both film and drama? No.
I think Goldsmith in London is good for film and drama. Falmouth has been pretty good over the years, although perhaps I'm not sure whether they still do a drama course. It can be tricky sometimes finding film and drama. You might just have to enter that into a Google search, but have a go and see what comes.
Or have a look at ucas.com. That's where all the university courses will be on there as well.
I think, sorry, I'm just quickly going through some of the questions. Quite a lot of them are quite specific to different universities. So what we'll do is, if we don't get time to answer your question tonight, we'll put these into a Q&A document that we'll send out afterwards and will be on our website. So don't worry if we don't get to your question. We will answer it at some point and let you know.
Okay. Can I just say one other thing, just generally? You will see a variety of film studies programs, degree programs, and film production programs. Now, some of you may have a preference for studying film as an academic discipline in the same way that you might study sociology or English literature, for instance. Others of you will have a real interest in wanting to make films, so film production will be particularly important to you. But if you look at some of those that I've given on the previous slide, some of the names of those universities with the names of the BA programs, some of them will say film studies or some of them will say film production. Look to see how much of an emphasis is given to the study of film and how much is given to actual film production. Some university courses will try to balance the two, and some will give a preference for either film studies or film production. But I would just say to you, don't forget about the history, because filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, Brian De Palma, these were filmmakers who were among the first of their generation to go to film school. So they were really studying what was happening in the Soviet Union in the 1920s or Germany in the 1920s in the hands of Murnau or Eisenstein. So an understanding of film history has been really important to those filmmakers, and I think remains important to most filmmakers. So don't forget that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Martin. Someone just asked if we could send out the list of websites that were on the slide. Yes, we'll definitely include those in our follow-up to you. Thank you for your lovely comments. Just a couple more if you don't mind, Martin. One question was, is the film industry competitive, and are there any extracurricular things that I can do now that will be acknowledged, or what universities might be looking for?
Yes. As with any creative industry career, it is competitive, but please don't let that put you off. I mean, everything is competitive these days, and we all just have to keep getting better and better at what we do, I suppose. Extracurricular, yeah, pick up a camera. You know, try and see things as you would see them through a camera. I think that would be my greatest encouragement, really, because, as I say, trying to create visual stories is a real skill, and of course, you know, you will be taught how to do it. But even if you go on to do an A-level in media or film studies, you will probably get an opportunity in an A-level or even a BTEC national diploma, which are very, very good with their weighting on the practical aspects. You will get to write scripts, you will get to use cameras, you will get to draw storyboards. I would say that learning to produce a storyboard would be a really good thing to do, because by preparing a storyboard, you're actually using your mind and your eyes like a camera. You're imagining how you would move, you know, from one scene to the next, and carry an audience with you. It's always so important to think about the audience, you know, because whilst you might have an idea about your story, and whilst your story will make sense to you, does it make sense to other people? And that's what you've always got to keep at the forefront of your mind. So start thinking like filmmakers, I would say, and write scripts, write storyboards, and pick up a camera, or even use your mobile phones. to try to make, very short stories.
Brilliant, thank you, Martin. That's really good. A few of you are asking about what grades you might need and what different options there are. Just briefly, so grades wise, GCSEs, you need to be getting grade 4s and above, including English and maths, for anything you want to do at level 3. And then level 3, there is film studies A levels, but there are lots of different vocational options as well in things like film studies and media. So there'll be you can do your research and look at your local colleges and sixth forms and kind of see what different options are out there for you. So don't.
Somewhere like Bournemouth, and it won't be the only place, but if you're doing a BTEC, level 3 BTEC national diploma, I mean, you've got something in the region of 16 modules, all told, in that course. And Bournemouth would want, say, 3 distinctions. So, getting into some of these places that are really, and I've given you the list of the really good ones. So, expect the admission grades to be high, okay? But don't be put off. That's the most important thing. Don't be put off. Okay.
Thank you.